Do you ever feel overwhelmed by the ever-changing world of technology? Tech It Out can help make some sense of it all. Breaking down geek speak into street speak, technology columnist, author, and TV personality Marc Saltzman covers consumer technology each week for every listener. Marc tackles the latest news, reviews, and how-tos to help you understand what's hot, what's not, and why.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 74th episode of Tech It Out. Wow, time flies. We do have a great show planned for you this hour, including interviews with Rich DeMuro from KTLA and the Rich on Tech podcast, as well as a chat with Scott C. Jones, celebrated journalist and broadcaster who just penned a very sobering guest column on childhood abuse that he endured and how he turned to video games in part to help cope with this trauma. No doubt that will be a great interview. And speaking of gaming, this hour I'll also talk about PlayStation VR, virtual reality, and a lot more on this week's Tech It Out. It's a thrill to have on the show for the first time Rich DeMuro. He is, of course, a tech reporter for KTLA in LA. He's on KFI AM 640 in LA, a regular guest on other radio shows and podcasts like Twit, This Week in Tech, and because he has all this free time, he's also the author of the book 101 Handy Tech Tips for the iPhone. Rich is here to chat with us about his favorite gadgets and gear from 2018. Welcome to the show, Rich.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark. Love to be on with you. Thank you.
And I know how busy you are, as our listeners heard in my short intro on what you do. But with that in mind, thank you for carving out some time to chat with us. There was a lot of new tech that debuted this year. Anything caught your eye as the year is about to wrap up?
Oh my gosh, so many great pieces of technology this year. And we have reached sort of an interesting time with technology where people are very happy with the gadgets they have. They're very happy with the home theater setup they have and also the phone that they have. But that doesn't mean that there's not better stuff out there. And at this point, we're seeing sort of incremental upgrades on a lot of devices, right? But there are some meaningful things, and something as simple as the Fire TV stick, right? So the Fire TV stick is something that people have known about for many years. It's this super simple streaming device that's usually very cheap. You plug it into the back of your TV, it gives you access to Netflix and all the different streaming services. But the 4K stick that Amazon came out with has a really killer feature. Not only does it add that 4K, better resolution, but it has this great new remote, and it's an Alexa voice remote that not only sort of gives you Alexa control over all of your home theater gadgets, but it also, for the first time, finally has the volume, mute, and power buttons on the remote control for the Fire TV stick, which I just love. I hate complicated setups. I hate having to use various remote controls for my devices. So when I got this thing and set it up, I thought that was such a cool addition. And by the way, Mark, this thing only sells for $50. I just bought two of them yesterday on special for $60 because Amazon was running a deal, and you get everything you need. It's snappy, it's fast, you get all the streaming services that you can want, and I just think that's a fantastic deal. And again, it's a small upgrade, but if I'm sitting there with a Fire TV stick from a year ago and I'm going, I got to use two different remotes, it's kind of a pain. Also, it's gotten a little slow and laggy. This one's a lot faster, plus it adds that remote. The remote alone is a $30 value. You get it included in that $50.
I think Amazon said that their Fire TV stick was their best-selling tech item for 2018, and no surprise there. I know that some people who already have a smart TV will still use something like this because it's a better remote, a better interface, and faster performance. So they're actually not even using the built-in Netflix support or Amazon Prime Video support in their television itself, but they're using an inexpensive HDMI device like this instead. So it's not just for those who don't have a smart TV, right?
Yeah, and I actually recommend that you don't get a smart TV because I'd rather you get something like a Fire TV stick or an Apple TV and add it to your TV, because here's the reason. If you get a smart TV from a manufacturer that is not a Roku, something like that, one of these other brands, they're not updating the apps as often as I'd like. If you're on a Fire TV, which is probably one of the #1 platforms for streaming, or an Apple TV or a Roku, those apps are being updated by the companies all the time. time. And so you're getting kind of the latest features and the best resolution. Everything that they're adding, you're getting pretty immediately. So with some of these smart TVs, you don't know when those apps are being upgraded. And that's why I say, yeah, plug in a Fire TV stick to your smart TV, or just don't even get a smart TV with software. Just get a nice 4K TV. I know they're tough to find without the smarts, but I do recommend that as well.
All right. So a stocking stuffer priced gadget leads your top picks for the year. What else would you recommend for someone looking to gift something to a loved one or themselves?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. I'm really liking this thing from Mophie. It's called the Charge Stream Wireless. And so this is a device that, those portable battery banks that we've all become familiar with, and they're great for travel. You throw one in your bag. I never have one too far away from me. When I go out with my wife at night, I always say, hey, can you put this portable battery in your purse? Because I just never want to be without a charge. And this one is unique because the new phones, the new iPhones, iPhone 8 and up, and also the Samsung Galaxy S6 and up, and also the new Google Pixel 3, they all support wireless charging now, and they all use the same standard, which is called Qi. And this portable battery bank from Mophie now has wireless charging built right into it, so you just lay your phone on top of the device instead of plugging in a cable, and it charges. And I love that because it's just simple. You're in a hotel room or you're out at a restaurant, you just lay your phone on top of this thing. You don't have any unsightly wires hanging out everywhere, and it's just a really nice way to do that. This is $100, so it's a little bit more expensive. I know some power banks go for like $20, $30, but I love having that convenience of the wireless charging built right into the battery.
It's nice and convenient, but it does charge up the phone slower than a cable. But again, you don't have all that mess of wires in your way. So a small trade-off there.
I agree. I always tell people this. I think this is more for convenience. These are getting better at charging your phone faster, but the reality is, yes, it's more like a trickle charge. It's kind of like to keep your phone topped off. That's the way I see it. So it's either for short periods of time where you just want to kind of keep your phone topped off but still use it, or for longer periods of time, say overnight, when you're not using your phone, that's when you'll get a full charge. But if you think you're going to put your phone on this and have it fully charged up in 20 minutes, not going to happen.
We're chatting with Rich DeMuro. He's a tech reporter for KTLA Channel 5 in Los Angeles, along with other shows, both on radio and TV. He's a regular guest of. Before we talk about your new book, 101 Handy Tech Tips for the iPhone, tell us one more great gadget for someone this year that they should consider.
This one is kind of I'm getting a lot of questions about backing up photos, and I always recommend Google Photos, but not everyone wants to be on Google Photos. So there's a device from SanDisk called the iExpand flash drive. And this plugs into the bottom of your iPhone through the Lightning port, and it backs up your camera roll. And you can also use it as sort of a little external hard drive as well. So if you load up some movies onto your flash drive and then plug it into your phone, you can watch those movies. So this is a nice way to sort of back up your phone really easily. It's simple, it's fast, and it works.
So two other things you can do with this. You can plug the other end of the drive into a computer and drag and drop some movies onto it, and then plug it into your iPhone or iPad to watch movies right off of that SanDisk drive. Alternatively, you can keep it plugged into your iPhone or iPad all the time, or at least when you're about to shoot video or take photos, and record it directly to that drive. So if you're getting that message that you're running out of storage, this is a nice way to combat that, and again, without breaking the bank. All right, Rich, now let's talk about your new book, 101 Handy Tech Tips for the iPhone. It's been updated for iOS 12, the newest operating system.
Yeah, so I came out with this book originally over the summer as an ebook, and it was a great response. But one of the biggest questions I got was, hey, Rich, I want to look at this book while I kind of have my iPhone right next to it, right? And so when are you going to do a paperback version? And I said, okay, well, it's too late now, but I know iOS 12 is coming out. So I figured, let me go back to the drawing board. I totally updated the book for everything with iOS 12. So how to create a Memoji, take control of your notifications, all about screen time, do not disturb, time limits for your apps, including you and your kids, because I know with all this digital well-being, we want to kind of take a break from our phones, both adults and children. Google Maps and Waze is now added to CarPlay, all the fun effects in iMessage and FaceTime, autofill for passwords, which is really cool. That's a great new feature. Group FaceTime with up to 32 people. So I've got all the new stuff in iOS 12. I talk about it in a very easy to understand. Mark, you kind of do what I do. We talk about stuff in a very simple to understand way, right? We're talking to the average person out there, not super techie. I mean, obviously I like those people too, but the majority of people have this technology and they want to know how to use it, right?
I call it breaking down geek speak into street speak, and you do a great job at that. So this book is in plain English. You don't need a degree in computer engineering to read it. And how much is the paperback? Where can we find it?
The paperback is $20. It's on Amazon. And again, it's not just the stuff in iOS 12, but it's all the little things that I just think you need to know about the iPhone. You know, there's a lot of little confusing aspects of it, like backing up your iPhone and getting rid of old backups and just all the features that are sort of hidden on the device. It doesn't come with a manual. This is not a manual for the device, but it's more of like using all of the questions that I've gotten over the years from my viewers and radio and podcasts and stuff, and just saying, what are people asking me about this? What can I tell them that makes them feel really cool, really in control of their device? And also some fun stuff you can show your friends when you're out and about and say, did you know your iPhone can do this? And again, it's 101 handy tech tips for the iPhone. It's on Amazon right now. And I think it makes a great holiday gift.
Of course. And especially for someone who maybe is unwrapping their first or next iPhone for Christmas. And I'm sure your website also links to both the paperback and the ebook version. So can you plug your website, Rich?
Sure. You can find everything I talk about at richontech.tv. And my podcast is also called the same thing, Rich on Tech. So, Mark, like you, I'm trying to be everywhere.
Well, thank you for the compliment, and keep doing what you're doing. I'm a big fan of yours, and I look forward to seeing you at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas in a couple of weeks from now.
All right. See you there.
Merry Christmas. Thanks, Rich. Happy holidays. Hey, this show, Tech It Out, is powered by ASUS for those in search of incredible. I'll tell you more about them after this short break, so stay tuned. When we return, we're going to chat with Scott C. Jones about this piece that he wrote for the Globe and Mail. You're listening to Tech It Out on the Radio America Network. We'll be right back.
Listen to Tech It Out whenever you want. Find the Tech It Out podcast at iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Tech It Out, everyone. In a moment from now, we'll have a chat with one of my favorite personalities in the video game industry, Scott C. Jones. No doubt it will be a great chat, and don't expect it to be a shallow one. But first, as the year is coming to a close, I do want to sincerely thank Tech It Out's title sponsor, ASUS. Thank you for your ongoing support. Without ASUS, this show would not happen. Of course, you know that ASUS creates technology for today and tomorrow's smart life, including its line of award-winning laptops, desktops, monitors, smartphones, tablets, smartwatches, and much, much more. For those in search of incredible, visit asus.com/US/radio for more info. That's asus.com/US/radio. Okay, on with the program. One of the biggest fallacies about video games is that it only dishes out a mindless, shallow experience, devoid of any real meaning or useful purpose. But that isn't accurate all the time. I mean, despite popular belief, in fact, games can be cathartic and therapeutic, perhaps as it offers a sense of control, order, and pattern and set rules. An exemplary example of the positive effect that games could have on one's life was so articulately expressed in a recent guest column for the Globe and Mail publication by Scott C. Jones, host of the heavily pixelated podcast, as he recounts and shares a painful childhood memory, but how video games to this day help him come to terms with it. And the headline of this article, by the way, is that video games saved his life, to put it into his words. So joining us on the line is Scott Jones. It's a pleasure to have you, Scott. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me. It's really an honor to be your guest today.
I've known you for what, a decade? I remember in New York.
Yeah, I remember like New York one time there was a press event and like I didn't know who you were. And there was this really sort of alpha male, aggressive guy. You sat down with you had some sort of video game satin jacket on and you were just a really intimidating presence. And I was new to the business. I'm like, who is that guy? And I did not know at the time that you were the burgeoning legend. Known as Marc Saltzman.
You're so funny. Yes, I know my towering 5'5.5" stature can be intimidating, but
no, it was just the authority you had at that meeting, and at a time when I was still new to the video game industry. So we didn't know each other. We didn't meet that day. but your presence, I've never forgotten that.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. That means a lot, Scott. And right back at you. I've been following your career. Tell us a bit about yourself and your work, including your TV work that many of our listeners may recognize you from.
Yeah, I'm a writer. I'm from New York originally. And, I had a lot of really crappy jobs and crappy careers for a long time. And I just always dreamed about working in the video game industry. Like, it was such a fantasy. This is back when Electronic Gaming Monthly, before it was even known as EGM, was like the reigning king of video game magazines. And it was always my dream was to write for them. And then the internet came along, and IGN and GameSpot, and all the sort of the way it exploded, and all of a sudden everybody had these bylines. And I just thought, I really want to write about this stuff. And so I ended up getting a job writing reviews for a couple of different magazines, and one job led to 5 jobs. Suddenly I was going to GDC and E3, and suddenly I was flying places and playing games, and games are being Federal Express to my door, and like all of it was so exciting for me. It was all I really wanted as a career, even though I didn't really make a ton of money doing it. I just really felt like I had something important to say about games, though I wasn't really sure what that was up until maybe a week ago, Saturday, when the Globe and Mail story ran.
You're such a talented writer. So I've been following these bylines, and then of course with Electric Playground, Reviews on the Run, I believe you were shooting those out of Vancouver, living there at the time. And we saw your smiling mug on national TV hosting this show that celebrated video games as art. And you interviewed the developers, and you debated on camera about what games were worthy and which ones were not, and why, and all that. So great stuff. And then, yes, I would argue that what you recently did for the Globe and Mail publication, this guest column that you wrote, is the most meaningful, if I may use that word, expression of your fondness for games. But it's a lot deeper than that. And I do implore our listeners to read this article called Video Games Saved My Life on the Globe and Mail's website. Tell us what this opinion column was all about.
Well, honestly, just to go back a little bit further, I remember being a kid, and I remember just my mother and father, like, they loathed video games. They just absolutely hated them the way a lot of parents do. And they would just always see me with the, Nintendo controller in my hand and just say, why don't you go outside and play? Like, what are you doing with this stuff? And honestly, I really didn't have a good answer for them. And I feel like my whole career as a video game journalist and as a writer and as a TV host has just been trying to answer that question. I don't know why I love these things. I don't know why they had such gravity for me back when I was a kid. And that's really what the story in the Globe and Mail was about. It was just me on a journey, on a quest, really, to kind of answer that question once and for all. And, I got sick a couple of years ago, back when I was doing the TV show in Vancouver, and it was kind of a life-threatening touch-and-go situation for a while, and I just feel like my life kind of got extended a little bit more, and I'm just still here, and I'm so grateful for that and so thankful for that I just felt like, what stories are the stories that I need to tell at this point with the time I have here on Earth, and I think we forget that sometimes in the tech space, especially.
Yeah, it's a amazing first-person account of a period of time in your childhood, and you talk about Pac-Man coming to the rural area that you were brought up in upstate New York. But without prying, Scott, there is a deeper, more significant emotional element tied to it, if you're willing to share it with us when we return. So thank you, Scott, for hanging on. We'll be right back to continue chatting with Scott C. Jones. You're listening to Tech It Out on the Radio America Network. Please stand by. We'll be right back.
Want to follow Marc? Google him. Marc with a C and Saltzman with a Z. Breaking down geek speak into street speak. This is Tech It Out. Tech It Out with technology columnist, author, and TV personality Marc Saltzman.
Welcome back to Tech It Out. We're chatting with Scott C. Jones, who just penned an article that's garnering quite a bit of buzz and praise. It's called How Video Games Saved My Life. There is a deeper, significant, emotional element tied to it, if you're willing to share it with us. Can you talk to us about what came out of this story, and perhaps the first time that you've told, other than your mom, what happened, and how it tied back to the order of video games and you being able to have control over a part of your life, at least digitally?
Well, you have to understand, and I think you're a little bit younger than I am. So when television was coming along, and I remember our first TV was black and white, like we were poor. And then we got a color TV, and then you'd watch TV, but there were only like 3 channels, especially if you lived in rural upstate New York like I did. And so, whatever was on TV seemed terribly important. And so when video games came along and suddenly you could control even a Pong paddle, like in the earliest days of video games, all of a sudden I felt like I had so much agency. And it really was tremendously satisfying to me as a kid when I was 6, 7, 8 years old to be able to control a Pong paddle on the TV in the house. Like there is no more powerful platform than the television back then. And so what happened basically, and, the story is more complicated than this, but the gist is I was molested by a neighbor, and I asked my family for help, and I didn't get the help that I needed. And I feel like that created like a center of despair in my life. And I didn't know what to do other than to turn to video games, which the Atari 2600 was sort of the console that was, sort of ruling the world back then. And so those games were satisfying, and I really believe therapeutic for me at a time when I didn't feel like I had a lot of control of my life, and I didn't have a lot of control about what was happening. All of a sudden I could control, a spaceship or, like just these tiny little pixelated things on the screen, and being able to do that, I think, really just gave me sort of the spiritual relief that I needed at that point. And so I feel like in some ways I finally, after many decades of trying to answer this question, I accepted something that happened to me that I really struggled with accepting for a long period of time. But I finally did, and I feel like in accepting that this happened to me, I finally got an answer to the question. It's a tough story to tell. It's a tough story to read, from what I understand. And but I feel like this is really why games mean so much to me. This is why I built my life around games. This is why my career has been built around games. They've really been at the center of my world for, as long as I can remember.
What prompted you to write this now at 49 years old? What was it about the platform or the timing that just said, okay, I'm ready to tell this story? Is it to help others come to grips with something before it's decades later? Or was it just you had finally the opportunity because Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine was not the platform to do it?
Yeah, no, honestly, what happened is, the world changed and tilted under my feet, and everyone who works in media, whether it's on TV, if you have an internet show, like newspaper and magazine and websites, like everything is kind of shifted. And so the show that I worked on, Electric Playground or EP Daily and Reviews on the Run, those shows went off the air. And so I left Vancouver, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do next. And so I spent a couple years trying a couple different hats on to see where I was going to go. And I launched a podcast a couple years ago here in Toronto called Heavily Pixelated, which is really, I just thought of it as my chance to have more mature conversations with gamers. And honestly, at my age, now that I'm in my late 40s and soon to be into my 50s, like I don't want to talk about graphics and video games anymore. It's like, why can we not have a more mature conversation at 49, 50 years old about video games that's not about whether the graphics in Breath of the Wild are better than the graphics in God of War? It's just like that we got to be able to let's talk on a higher level. And so that's really what I wanted to do. And most of the gamers that I know, the ones who work in the industry and the ones who are just regular people, they're some of the most articulate people I know. And I just really wanted to celebrate that, their ability to be articulate. And so the podcast really was me having honest conversations with people telling me how they have used video games to get through challenging times in their lives. Right. And, the podcast, because of my connections in the industry, I've been able to give them a chance to thank the people who actually made these entertainments. And so that's the way I like to close every show. If I can, I find the people who worked on the game, and I give the people who leaned on this game, I make it real for all of them. And I feel like people don't thank video games enough. People don't get the chance to say thank you to the people who made these products. We just consume them. We hang scores on them, and we move on with our lives. But just making everybody real, making the gamer real, making the people who developed the games, the people who wrote the games and produced the games, making them real. I feel like I want to make everybody real. I want to be more real. I want to be more honest about who I am. I want developers to be more honest about who they are. And I want the people who play these games and consume these things to be honest about who they are too.
Awesome. You were definitely elevating this space beyond just, as you said, a score or just an argument about the graphics, or it's a lot deeper than that. So kudos on the amazing work you're doing with Heavily Pixelated. And no doubt your health scare a couple of years ago, this near-death experience, I think you had a heart infection, which led to a series of strokes. That also probably prompted you to tell your story as well and thank the video games in a way. I know that sounds kind of cheesy. Yeah,
totally. Like our time here is short, Mark. Like it's real. Like we just really get a little window of time where we get to be around. And I just think, if you've got stories you want to tell, like if whatever the work of your life is, get busy doing it today. And I just feel like there's just so much passivity, among everybody, not just among gamers, but, we'll watch we'll binge watch, the entire Friends series over a weekend. It's just like, what are we doing with our days? Let's make our days count more. And I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to make my days count more. And I'm trying to tell the stories that I feel like I need to tell. And then I'm the person who's supposed to tell them.
Love that, Scott. And I really value and appreciate your sincerity. A few more minutes with Scott C. Jones, in fact. Lucky us. When we return after this short break, we'll talk with him a bit more about the Heavily Pixelated podcast that he hosts as well. You can always reach him at scottcjones.com. And towards the end of the show, as promised, I'll chat a bit about PlayStation VR and where they're at. We'll be right back with more Tech It Out.
Breaking down geek speak into street speak. Tech It Out, hosted by Marc Saltzman.
Welcome back to Tech It Out. We're talking with Scott C. Jones, host of the Heavily Pixelated podcast, about a guest column he wrote for the Globe and Mail entitled Video Games Saved My Life, with a subtitle, Mastering the Mazes of Pac-Man Helped Guide Me Through a Traumatic Childhood, and as an adult, Gaming Healed the Wounds Left Behind. Finally, Scott, what could others learn from this opinion piece that you wrote? I think from your podcast, you've already explained what you want people to get out of it, that there's a lot more depth and meaning to this platform, this medium, rather. But what about this piece? Do you think that it could encourage others who maybe have been abused and have kept quiet about it to help them come out? Is this one of your goals with this?
No, I am. I just think what I'm trying to say to people is you might not know why you're playing this game, today. You might not know why you went to the store and this is the game you decided that you were going to play this weekend. And you don't have to know today. Like sometimes it might take you 6 months, or it might take you 6 years, or, in my case with the child abuse that I endured when I was a kid, might take you, 3.5 decades before you can finally really reconcile, why you chose to spend your time in this way. But just know that there's probably a reason why you're doing what you're doing, and you might not be able to articulate it today, but just keep doing what you're doing and just trust in the fact that at some point you're going to get the answers to these questions if you want the answers to these questions. And whenever somebody says to you, go outside and why don't you do something more useful with your time? You're just playing a video game. You're wasting your time. Just trust in the fact that you might not be wasting your time at all. In fact, you might be doing the only thing that you really can do today. And it's fine. It's totally fine.
I love that. That's awesome. Finally, how do you feel now that this article has been published and it's been so widely recognized and appreciated? What are your emotions tied to that?
I mean, it's exciting. I still get private emails from people every day thanking me for writing it. Not like a ton of emails, not like an overwhelming amount of emails, but like 3 to 5 messages from people who are telling me, I understand what you went through. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. It helps me understand myself a little better. And, that just gives me so much joy to feel like I'm helping people. I'm opening doors for people. I'm opening their eyes really for the first time in their lives to things that maybe they haven't ever been comfortable talking about. I want to talk about the things that are uncomfortable. And I just feel like, there's just so much denial that we're comfortable living with. And I feel like just being real about who you are and accepting who you are and the complications of your life, if you do that sooner rather than later, you're going to live a more satisfying life for sure.
That's awesome. Scott, thank you so much for the courage that it took to write that column. It's a great, if not sobering, read. You showed us a very different side of games and their effect on us, and I do applaud you for that. And thank you also for taking the time to chat with us today. Really, really appreciate it, Scott. ScottCJones.com is your website. I encourage people to have a read at that article, as well as subscribe to Heavily Pixelated, the podcast, which you can find on iTunes or at ScottCJones.com. Scott, once again, all the best and a happy, healthy holiday season to you.
Thanks, Mark.
Wow, what a great guy, huh? You can hear why. Be sure to visit his website, Scott C. Jones, to check out all of his work, and be sure to read that article. It is a bit disturbing, not too graphic, but still, it's a hard read. But I think it's an important one, and it will give you a different perspective on video games. Speaking of games, in a few moments from now, I'm going to talk about PlayStation VR and where they're at there. I think you might be surprised to hear how many titles there are and what's going on. I also wanted to share with you some gadgets that I showed on TV shows this week as Christmas is coming up. A couple of last-minute gadget gift ideas. One is from VTech, that kids brand. It's called Kitty Buzz. It's only, I think, $79, and it is like a smartphone for little kids for 4 through 9 when you don't want to hand them your smartphone or give them an expensive tablet that they will likely drop. Instead, this does look like a phone, and it does let kids watch videos, play games. There's about 40 different educational games in there. You can listen to music, you can read ebooks, you can go to some parent-approved websites. But what I like about it, and you can take photos. There is a camera on a 180-degree swivel, so you can change it from a rear-facing camera to a front-facing one. But what I really like about it is that parents can message with their kids back and forth. So parents just need this Kitty Buzz app on their smartphone. It works with iOS or Android. And then the kid has the device over Wi-Fi, and you can message with them like a smartphone. So it really gives them the feeling like they've got some independence, and they've got an entertainment device and a camera all wrapped into one for under $80, no less. And it does have parent control features, of course. It's also rugged. It's a durable device, so if they drop it, it's totally fine. Available in 2 colors. There's a pink and purple one, and then there's a blue and gray one, and that's called Kitty Buzz from VTech. I also showed the QLED TVs from Samsung, which are gorgeous and start at $700 and change. So not breaking the bank for a very high quality TV with phenomenal color. That's for the 49-inch model, by the way. And it goes up from there. It's like between $700 and $800, depending on where you buy it. And I also, that's from Samsung. And that's not just for color, but for contrast and for high brightness. It also has what's called an ambient mode. So when you're not watching TV, it can show high resolution artwork on the screen. It could show information like local weather and so on. It could show your own photos, which is pretty cool too, and a lot more. Again, that's the QLED family of TVs. And finally, something more practical, maybe a good gift for a new homeowner, and that's the My D-Link Wi-Fi water sensor. As the name suggests, it can detect water and immediately notify you no matter where you are on the planet. You have an app, and it'll tell you that it senses water, maybe in a basement if you have one, and it'll tell you that there is an issue and that you should act on it right away. There's also a 90 decibel alarm if you are at home, and that product is only $39. We'll be right back with more Tech It Out. Stay with us.
Follow Marc Saltzman on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Listen to Tech It Out whenever you want.
I've really enjoyed today's show. I hope you did as well. We spoke with Rich DeMuro from KTLA about some top picks for the holidays, and then Scott Jones. That was the bulk of the show. It was a longer interview than I usually do on this program, but I think it warranted it, and I hope you found it an interesting discussion. Now, I wanted to wrap up something a little bit lighter and talk about VR, virtual reality, where we're at. Specifically, I worked this week with PlayStation VR to talk about the technology. Did you know that there were over 340 different PlayStation VR games and other experiences available worldwide? That's pretty darn impressive. And you know the drill, VR, right? Put on the headset, plug it into your PS4, you put a little PlayStation camera just above your TV, and then you're off to the races. You can put in earbuds or headphones, which I would recommend, and you grab the controllers. It actually works with a couple of different controllers. One is the DualShock 4 wireless controller for many of those games, and that's the regular PlayStation 4 controller or joystick that comes with the system. And then, of course, there's the optional PlayStation Move controllers, which is one per hand, and that also talks to that camera. There's different lit up ball on the top. And that gives you a little bit more freedom of movement and interaction inside of these games. And then some games support like a virtual gun and things like that. So a handheld device for some of those games like Farpoint, where it's a shooter. So there's lots to choose from. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions about VR is that there isn't a lot of content out there. That's anything but the truth. There's a lot of content, whether it's some exclusive games as well as third-party games available on all virtual reality platforms, including ones for PCs and ones for phones or those standalone ones. But what I like about PlayStation VR, or PSVR for short, is that it's really just plug and play, as I mentioned. It's a lot easier to set up and use compared to some of the other systems out there. Yet, doesn't sacrifice performance. You really do get an amazing experience. So one misperception is that there's not a lot of content out there or different genres. There's adventure games like Moss, which is a family-friendly game starring a little white mouse that you can control with your quill, to shooter games, to role-playing, fantasy role-playing games. There's strategy games. There are simulations, and of course all kinds of different multiplayer games, not just single player games. So yes, there are some single player games like Moss or Borderlands 2 VR, but there's a lot of multiplayer games as well that you can have fun with, whether it's someone beside you, like everybody's taking turns on the PSVR headset and the others are playing on the TV itself, or over the internet, right? So like a traditional multiplayer game like a Fortnite, but you're playing through your VR headset. So lots of choice in genre, in type of play, and in titles, which is pretty cool. According to research firm Magid Advisors, more than half of people surveyed, or about 54%, believe that virtual reality will also change how people watch TV shows and movies. So it is going to change other entertainment mediums. It's not just about gaming. And that's kind of an interesting finding from this commissioned survey. Also, nearly half of those surveyed, about 43%, said they look to VR for a fully immersive experience, and 41% of consumers are interested in experiencing VR with others. Again, as I mentioned, not just a solitary experience anymore. Among those who used a VR device in the past 2 years, 70% are interested in using a VR device again in the next 6 months. So it really is a game changer. Pardon the pun. And just to wrap up, there's some good bundles available if you're looking to pick up a PSVR headset with some games already. There's 2 games in each bundle. One is that Borderlands 2 VR and Beat Saber bundle. So that's great for action fans, first person as well. And of course, the VR rhythm game Beat Saber. That's $349 for that bundle. Creed Rise to Glory and Super Hot are another bundle. Of course, Creed based on the boxing franchise, based on Rocky and Apollo Creed. And Super Hot is a really innovative action game. That's $349 as well. And then for $299, you can get the Astrobot Rescue Mission and Moss bundle. That's a little bit more of a family-friendly game that you can take advantage of, or 2 games, rather, I should say. And Astrobot, by the way, won Best VR Game of the Year at the Game Awards. We spoke with Jeff Keighley about that a few weeks ago, and the awards ran last week with over 20 million views online. Amazing stuff. Hey, I want to thank my sponsor to wrap up the show. Tech It Out is brought to you by ASUS, creating technology for today and tomorrow's smart life. ASUS, for those in search of incredible. Visit asus.com/US/radio for more info. That's asus.com/US/radio. I want to ask you, since it is near the end of the year, if you've got any feedback for me on Tech It Out, what you would like to hear going forward, some guests or topic ideas, things things you don't like about the show, feel free to reach out. I'm on Twitter at Marc_Saltzman. That's MARC_SALTZMAN. Alternatively, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you would prefer to write me directly and privately, you can do so on my website, marcsaltzman.com. And of course, you can hear and subscribe to the podcast right there as well. Have a great rest of your weekend, everyone, and I look forward to chatting with you next time on the special holiday version of Tech It Out. Ciao for now. Happy holidays.